brain surgery on The Operation, Wednesday at 8 on TLC.
Welcome to the world of chocolate. It's Chocolate Passion, a treasury of delectable desserts prepared by 8 of the country's great chefs, including Seth Rayner from Nantucket, Massachusetts, Jacques Torres and Kate Charlton from New York City, Albert Leach from White Post, Virginia, Vincent Van Heck from St. Michael's, Maryland, from Washington, D.C., Francesco Ricci and Dominique Labourne, and Robert Lanx from Paris, France.
The first dish comes from Seth Rayner, chef-owner of the boarding house on Nantucket Island. It's an example of molded chocolate that is cooked like a souffle. Here it is cooked in individual ramekins, but the terrine could also go into a loaf pan.
So for the chocolate terrine, we're going to take a pound of bittersweet chocolate that we have shaved moderately fine so it melts quite easily. Half a pound of cubed up sweet butter, and 2/3 a cup of Kahlua. Just combine those, set them over the double boiler, and let them melt. But you have to be careful as to not let them melt too fast so the chocolate doesn't burn. So if it takes a bit of time, just let it do its thing. And you can give it a stir every couple of minutes. But it'll take at least 15 minutes. So now the chocolate is 98% melted. Got a couple stragglers in there, but we can set that aside.
6 whole eggs begin the next step.
And a 1/4 cup of sugar. And we're just going to set this over the double boiler to gently warm it. And not to cook them, but only to warm them. And when they get a little warm, we can start whipping them. But I'm just going to mix them a little bit right now. And it takes maybe 2 minutes to just get them up in temperature. Now the eggs are warm. We're going to start whipping them. You can over the heat, or you can turn the burner off and just keep a little bit of the heat on there. And the heat from the water will continue to keep the eggs warm.
This takes a while. The eggs should be beaten until pale yellow and fairly thick in consistency.
And you're going to whip it till about 2 to 3 times its volume.
Combine the eggs with the melted chocolate mixture.
And we'll slowly fold in the beaten eggs to the chocolate about 1/3 at a time, just as if you're making chocolate mousse. And you have to be a little careful, but it's... a little more. And the final. And if you have any of the scrambled eggs up there, you just leave them in that bowl. And you can do this with a spatula or a whip. I prefer to use a spatula.
After thoroughly mixed, ladle into ramekins.
4 to 5 ounce ramekins that we're just going to spray with a little Pam or vegetable coating. Just lightly spray them, get all the sides, bottom. And now, put your chocolate mixture in. Now pour in some warm water. You can remove one of them to make it easier. Have a towel or a piece of paper on the bottom to insulate it against the direct heat from the bottom of the oven. You can pour them up about halfway up the sides of the ramekin. Put that back in. Put it in a 425 oven, and the first 5 minutes are uncovered, and the second 10 minutes we put a piece of foil on top, and we finish baking them like that. Now that the terrines are done cooking in the oven, you want to let them cool in the water bath for 45 minutes before you refrigerate them. And at that point, you can either let them go overnight or at least in the refrigerator for 5 or 6 hours. At that point, you can take the cooked terrine, put it in a little saute pan with the warm water, just for a couple seconds. Take your knife, run it around the rim, and then you're going to unmold. Oh.
Put the terrine back in the refrigerator just to set up.
Take a little unsweetened, unflavored whipped cream. It's right on the top. We have chocolate sauce and a blackberry coulis. You can just decorate the plate.
Charlton, pastry chef at the Park Avenue Cafe in New York, demonstrates a milk chocolate twist to the classic custard creme brulee. At the restaurant, it's served with chocolate curls and a white chocolate truffle. She begins with the preparation of the custard.
What I'm adding to the pot, I've put in cream, milk, and a very little bit of sugar. Most of the sugar that goes into the creme brulee is made into a caramel. Okay, the rest of the sugar I'm putting in a pot with a little bit of water. You don't want to put too much water in, or it's going to take too long for you to cook your caramel. Just enough water so that you cover over so that all the sugar is wet. You know, basically just so that it covers, and that's fine. So I've put both the cream, milk, and a little bit of sugar, and the sugar to cook to a caramel on the stove. When the sugar turns to caramel and you add it to your milk, if it's not quite to a boil, at that point, it will help the milk come up to a boil. So those we can let cook. In the meantime, I've chopped, not too finely, you know, relatively small pieces is all right. Milk chocolate, 12 ounces of milk chocolate. And this is where our creme brulee differs from a regular creme brulee, because what we've done is we've taken the added flavor of chocolate, added it into the creme brulee to make it a little bit richer. Our creme brulee is a little bit more like a pudding, a milk chocolate pudding. So what happens now, once the milk and cream and the caramel all come to a boil, I'm going to pour them over the chocolate to melt the chocolate.
When the sugar and water have caramelized, the mixture is incorporated into the cream and milk.
Okay, this is about the color that we cook it to. If you like a very strong caramel flavor, you can cook it a little further than that, but being careful not to burn it. What I'm doing now is I'm carefully ladling a little bit of the hot milk into my pot. This is a very delicate step because the caramel at this point is very hot as well. And once any other liquid hits it, as you can see, it bubbles up quite rapidly. The reason for adding a little bit of milk or cream to your caramel is that it loosens it up a little bit and it won't lump to the bottom of your other pot when you pour it in. Okay. Again, carefully, I'm going to add my caramel to my pot of milk and cream, which has okay, you can see it's certainly colored your milk to make it a little bit of deeper color. Let's now come back up to a boil, and I'm going to pour it onto my chocolate. Okay, at this point you can stir a little bit just to ensure that the chocolate's melting underneath and to incorporate it all together. Okay, all my chocolate's melted in the bottom. You can feel with the bottom of the whisk that there's nothing left. At this point, I'm going to let it cool off a little bit before I add my yolks.
For the purposes of this presentation, the chef accelerates cooling by putting the chocolate mixture over ice.
I'm going to ladle a little bit of the mix onto my yolks. This process is called tempering. It brings the yolks up to a closer temperature to the mixture that you're going to add them into. So it's not quite as much of a shock once they get incorporated. Okay, at this point I have enough mix in my yolks. I'm going to add them to the rest of the mixture.
Strain the mixture before baking. The custard mixture is cooked in a water bath.
Okay. So as you can see, I haven't quite filled them all the way, but that's certainly an ample portion for one person. Probably even a little bit more, but we think it's really good, so. All right, so this I will stick into a 300, 325 oven.
Bake for about 20 to 25 minutes.
You want it to have set, but you don't want it to be totally solid. You can still shake it around and it'll move, but it won't be watery when it shakes. You know, you won't have big waves, you'll just have a little bit of movement. So as it's baking, you can test it just by jiggling it a little bit.
The top holds a surprise, curled milk chocolate and a white chocolate truffle.
Burn the creme brulee to make a sugar coating on the top so that when you break through it with a spoon, it crunches. If you happen to have a butane torch at home, you're welcome to use that. Basically, the flame melts the sugar that I just poured on. And when it gets cold, then that film on the top is hard and crunchy. Okay, this is how it's presented to the guest. And as the waiter puts it on the table, they open up the top so that the guest can see what it is that's inside. And that's our creme brulee.
Albert Leach is pastry chef at L'Auberge Provençal near White Post, Virginia. His dessert features a chocolate mousse theme using white chocolate, technically not real chocolate since it contains no chocolate liqueur. It's a white chocolate mousse cake. The cake is started by creaming 1/4 cup of brown sugar, 1/3 cup of granulated sugar with 1/4 cup plus 1 tablespoon of sweet butter.
All right. Then we add in 1 egg. And we cream that.
Then 3/4 cup cake flour and 3/4 teaspoon baking powder are added.
Flour and the baking soda.
Finally, 2 ounces of melted semi-sweet chocolate go in. The batter then goes into a 9-inch spring-form pan that has been buttered and floured with a disc of parchment paper.
You spread it out a little bit, like that. It'll spread the rest of the way while it's cooking, but we spread it out a little bit so that it comes out very even. Then we cook that in a 325 preheated oven for about 25 minutes.
The next element is the white chocolate mousse. 8 ounces of good quality white chocolate is chopped. To this, add a 1/2 cup whipping cream and melt over warm water on low heat. 1 package of unflavored gelatin, which has been softened in 6 tablespoons water, is added to the melted chocolate.
White chocolate.
Then unsweetened whipped cream is folded in.
And we will fold in the whipped cream. And when that's in, fold in the egg whites.
These are 4 egg whites sweetened and beaten to a fairly stiff stage.
And we take our cake that's been finished cooking and cooled, and we pour the mousse right over the top of it.
Refrigerate this for about 4 hours or until the mousse sets. Garnish for the cake is a hazelnut praline, simply caramelized sugar and water with skinned hazelnuts. After being broken up into pieces, it is processed. The chilled mousse cake is topped with a glaze made from 4 ounces semi-sweet dark chocolate, 2 tablespoons sweet butter, and 2 tablespoons water.
You have to work rather quickly because it'll set up right away.
A white chocolate mixture prepared similarly decorates.
And swirl it around like that. And take a skewer or a toothpick and very carefully just draw the Sometimes if the chocolate's a little too warm still, you can just wait a second and it will draw a little better. And go one way and you go back the other way.
The cake is served on a Frangelico-flavored cream sauce, garnished with the ground hazelnut praline.
Not too much of a mess.
There's never too much of a good thing. We have chocolate mousse.
Scotch-based liqueur drambuie to flavor a souffle. Note his use of a panada or thick flour and butter paste to stabilize the souffle. Budded ramekins are coated with sugar.
And just roll the sugar around the souffle mold so that the butter is completely coated with the sugar. As you can see, it's right up to the rim.
Cool the ramekins while the souffle mixture is prepared.
So the first step for the preparation of the souffle is to basically make the beurre manier. It's equal quantities of butter and flour. Here the butter is soft. Makes it a lot easier to make it. Put in all the butter and all the flour. And just basically work it until you obtain a smooth paste. So it's become nice and smooth now. So just basically leave this to one side. So in a saucepan, put your milk in. You'll cut up chocolate. This is a bitter chocolate. And bring this up to the boil. So what you're actually doing here is bringing your milk up to the boil, also melting the chocolate at the same time. The chocolate has to be completely melted and dissolved before you take it to the next stage. It's a good idea to keep on the milk moving so that it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan. So you can see the milk coming up to the boil with the chocolate. At this stage, add in all the beurre manier in one go. Just pull it off the heat and just mix in the beurre manier to the liquid. Just whisk it in until it becomes nice and smooth. Just put it back on the heat for about 15-20 seconds, just to make sure that the flour is really well cooked out. And there is the starting of the base of your souffle. Okay, with a spatula, just double check it right. Oops. Get right down into the corners of your pan. Make sure everything is nice and smooth. Add your egg yolks in one go. Put all the egg yolks in and mix those in as fast as you can, because the heat which is retained by the mix has to cook the egg yolk slightly, so it has more of a binding effect when you actually cook the souffle. So mix this in again until it's nice and smooth. You can see the consistency. The consistency there is very, very important. It mustn't be too liquid, mustn't be too thick. At this stage, you can add in your drambuie. Just fold this in. And for the time being, just cover this base with a little bit of plastic wrap and just leave it in a warm place until your egg whites are beaten. When you've got to about 2/3 of the way to a firm egg white, you can start adding in your sugar slowly. So basically, just start sprinkling in your sugar. You need to add it in quite slowly to eventually obtain almost like a meringue base.
4 ounces of sugar are gradually added as the whites are beaten to a stiff peak stage.
Okay, so is the egg white ready? Peaks. Nice and smooth. Sugar's completely dissolved inside the egg white, and we can start putting the souffle together. So bring back your base, your souffle. Just add in about 1/3 of your egg white to start off with. This basically is to just to lighten the mix. At this stage, you don't really need to be too careful. You just want to lighten the basic panada down. Add the remaining egg whites. And this is where you need to be more careful. This is where you really need to start folding the egg whites into the mix, trying not to break the air in the egg white. Make sure you go right down to the bottom, right down to the center, so that you've got a very even mix. With a ladle, fill the ramekins up. Right to the top. With a palette knife, just scrape the top flat.
Bake the soufflés at 375 degrees for 6 to 7 minutes. Is an upscale Italian restaurant in Washington, D.C., specializing in Tuscan country-style food. Chef owner Francesco Ricci presents a chocolate variation on a classic Italian meringue dessert called merengata. It starts with 7 egg whites.
And we use sugar.
This is 8 ounces. The whites are beaten 7 or 8 minutes or until thick and glossy. Meanwhile, 8 ounces of powdered sugar and 3 ounces of cocoa powder are sifted together. This mixture will be combined with the meringue. Note with this meringue, the chef started the sugar and egg whites together. With beaten egg whites that are not meringue, the sugar is added after the egg whites have started to set up. The chef needs an extra pair of hands as the cocoa powdered sugar mixture is incorporated into the meringue, gradually at first.
You can put all now. Now we had to cook this, and we lay out with our pastry bag.
The meringue is piped into an 8-inch circle marked on parchment paper.
We're going to build up our disc. Somebody a long time ago was told, you don't know how to do a O with a glass. But in this case, you have not to be that round. We can work on later if it's too big.
The cake is comprised of 2 discs. They will be baked at 300 degrees for 2 hours. After baking and cooling, the discs are trimmed. This does not have to be too carefully done since the cake will be frosted. The trimmings are crushed and will be used to cover the final product.
This is the sweet part of our cake. Chocolate and sugar. We work out for a while.
The mixture that will serve as both filling and frosting is chocolate whipped cream. 2 quarts of whipping cream, 6 ounces of sugar, and 4 ounces of cocoa powder. Note the chef begins the mixture with a whisk. When the ingredients are fully combined, they go into an electric mixer.
And now that seems like it's firm and fluffy, we stop the machine.
Beat for 2 to 3 minutes, but be careful not to overmix. The whipped cream mixture is then piped onto one of the discs.
Take our disc. One more time.
Then the sides are frosted.
We take back our crumbs and we coat the outside. And with these crumbs and this that we use is the sweet side of the cake, and the whipped cream is the bitter side of the cake, and the combination is very, very good. You can enjoy doing because you use your hands, and is a kind of free form.
The finished cake is wrapped and frozen for at least 3 hours. It will hold for longer, but remove 1 hour before service.
Our slice, and being chocolate is a nice combination with raspberry sauce, which we put in front.
We diverge slightly for a lesson in candy making by Robert Lanx, a master chocolatier from Paris. His exclusive New York shop features some of the finest candies in the world, all handmade in Paris and flown to New York. Most of Monsieur Lanx's chocolates are made with flavored ganache, the cream and chocolate combination which he will demonstrate for this master class. Deborah Wagner, manager of the New York shop, interprets. We begin with the cream.
We'll be making a ganache with a lemon zest. First is put on a very light cream, a crème fleurette to boil. That cream only contains 28 to 30% milk fat. Right now he's chopping very finely the chocolate de couverture, which is a special chocolate, very high percentage of cocoa powder. He lets the cream come to a boil 3 times to remove all fermentation.
C'est une crème qui est très très légère parce que voilà, on dirait du
Very light cream, very liquid, very fluid.
Alors là tout de suite.
Now it's boiled a 3rd time, and now immediately.
Je vais arrêter. Alors je verse.
Pours the cream directly onto the finely chopped chocolate. And already you can see the chocolate starting to melt.
Alors on attend un tout petit instant.
Wait just a short moment.
Pour que le chocolat fonde.
To allow the chocolate to melt. He feels and he smells to see if the chocolate is melting. And now you're going to see the ganache actually come into being very, very brilliant, very shiny, very unctuous.
Si on remet,
smooth.
Si on remet trop fort,
if he were to stir that any more rigorously, the chocolate would actually turn. So it is in fact very important to be very gentle in stirring the ganache. Now he's taking his lemons and he's grating just the very lemon zest never penetrating into the white part of the lemon peel. And he'll use that lemon, and you'll see when he's done with it, there will still be just a very thin layer of the yellow on top of the white.
Voilà.
There you see.
Alors, je vais mettre un tout petit peu plus.
A little bit more.
2 citrons serait trop.
Two lemons would be too much, but with the size of, given the size of these 2 lemons, you need to feel to use just a little bit more. And a very good ganache, and what is so very important is to achieve a state of equilibrium between the chocolate and the flavor, here being the lemon. So that when you taste the finished chocolate, you'll taste first chocolate, and then secondarily the natural flavor, and then again chocolate.
The delicately balanced flavoring is a hallmark of Chef Lank's creations. He notes that no one else in France makes a chocolate with lemon.
Had Monsieur Lanx put the lemon in immediately before the ganache actually was created with the cream and the chocolate, had he put the lemon in initially, that barest amount of acidity would have prevented the chocolate from attaining the consistency that you see here.
The final step is a fairly vigorous whisking.
C'est très simple une ganache, mais ça tourne, c'est le plus difficile à faire dans le chocolat. Une très bonne ganache, une ganache très lisse.
It's really simple to make a ganache, and yet to make an excellent ganache, it's really an art, and to achieve such a beautiful, smooth consistency. Now Mr. Langston is going to pour that onto a tray and let it harden as it cools off. In France, this is done on a marble slab and left about 12 hours.
The ganache is then evened out with a spatula before cooling. After cooling, individual portions are cut, here with a warm knife, in France with a machine. The individual pieces are then coated with an eggshell-thin layer of chocolate.
The outer shell of the chocolate should always be very, very thin. The finer the shell, the finer the chocolate, because this function of the shell is actually just to protect that interior ganache from the air. Air is the #1 enemy of chocolate and will be the first thing to help or to really erode the taste of the chocolate.
This, then, is the delicious result and epitomizes the craft and delicacy of a world-class chocolatier. We now offer 3 other flavorings that all began with the same ganache used for the lemon candy. Danielle Bonneau, one of New Orleans' great French chefs, illuminates the steps.
We have the next step, who is made with fresh mint. And it's very important to see that step, because you really understand better how important in a ganache with such a delicate preparation, fresh mint can bring not just the flavor, but give you the deepness of the chocolate when you taste it. It melts in your mouth and you taste it, you taste the chocolate, then you have that fresh flavor of mint coming behind, and that's what makes a wonderful dessert to eat. The next thing we're going to see is the ginger. Now, ginger is a little bit more difficult because you have so much fibers in that roots. You will have to strain the cream after doing the infusion. And you see here we have a tough time to remove the fibers from the granite. Raspberry is probably, to me, my favorite dessert. It's so rich, not just in color, but also bring to the chocolate such a wonderful, light and velvet texture to the ganache.
Mint and ginger and raspberry chocolate ganache. But that's not enough. We'll return after this intermission with a chocolate fontaine and a chocolate president's cake you have to see to believe. Before that, please thank this station for bringing this and other fascinating programs to you by calling in your pledge of financial support.
Elaborate creation that balances raspberry ganache, chocolate cake, and phyllo dough. It's called chocolate and framboise fontaine.
So now we're going to do a dessert with chocolate and raspberry, and I call it chocolate fontaine. It's a chocolate sponge, ganache over the sponge, and raspberry on top, and we wrap that in phyllo dough. Put some butter on top, some powdered sugar, and bake that in a hot oven. That dessert is very crunchy outside with that phyllo dough and very soft and moist inside. So the first steps for that is to do the ganache. The ganache is the chocolate cream. So for the ganache, we have to boil the cream. So when the cream going to boil, we're going to add the chocolate. I just cut the chocolate in small pieces. And it's again a very convenient recipe. You can make more than 6, put them in a freezer, and when you have some friends, just use them. Okay, so we go now for the ganache. When the cream boils, we add the chocolate. Okay. That smells good. Okay, the ganache is fine now, it's ready. You see the ganache is a little bit elastic. If one day you do a ganache and the ganache separate, just add some cold cream inside. This is a little trick to, when the ganache separate sometimes happen, just add some cold cream, just some drop, mix again, and the ganache come back together. Okay, now I'm going to cool that on ice for 2 minutes and go do the dessert.
Small sponge cake discs are the base here, but you can also use slices of a standard size cake and cut the discs with a ring mold.
So I put some ganache on top of each sponge cake, like that. Okay. And I'm going to add some raspberry. You know, chocolate is raspberry, it's a classic dessert, but it's so good. Hop.
Sheets of phyllo dough will wrap the dessert.
And we go, I need some melted butter. So a little bit of butter, some powdered sugar on top, another layer of phyllo dough, like that. Again, some butter. And one more time with the sugar. Okay, so now I'm going to put the dessert on the phyllo dough, like 4 for one sheet. Cut that in 4 and wrap them. So I wrap them from the side, go to the other side, and close them like that. Butter again on top. Little bit of powdered sugar. And we bake them 6 minutes at 400 degrees Fahrenheit.
2 phyllo sheets, also painted with butter and sprinkled with sugar, are cut into triangles for garnish.
Okay, and now I cut some small triangle And this is going to help us to decorate the plate for the fontaine. Okay, now the other side. And we just bake that like 2 or 3 minutes at 400 degrees. It's a nice color, very crunchy. So we set up the triangle like that, 1, 2, and 3. Put some raspberry in each dash of cream, like that. Take the fontaine, yes, they're ready, out of the oven. Wow. This is hot too. Little more powdered sugar on top, just for the contrast. Okay, and now we put again 3 more triangle of phyllo dough.
Dominique Leborn is chef-owner of Palais du Chocolat in Washington, D.C. It's a wholesale retail operation, obviously specializing in chocolate. For this final dessert, Chef Leborn presents a pastry triumph called President's Cake. The 2 primary components of this dessert include a flourless cake and chocolate mousse. Start the cake by separating 6 eggs. The yolks and the whites, beaten, are both used in the cake.
This is a bittersweet chocolate.
The yolks will be combined with 8 ounces of melted bittersweet chocolate, a little high-quality cocoa powder, and 7 ounces of melted butter. Thoroughly mix the chocolate cocoa butter mixture. Then mix 2½ ounces of granulated sugar into the yolks. Put a little elbow grease into this step. Remember, you are dissolving the sugar completely into the yolks.
Sugar.
Meanwhile, the egg whites are beaten. About halfway through, begin to add sugar.
The egg white will be ready in a few minutes. What I will do, I will combine the egg yolks with the sugar, beat together with the chocolate on the cocoa.
Toward the end of beating, the remainder of the sugar is added. If you add the sugar too soon, it inhibits the process.
I will fold that inside the egg white. The egg whites are very light, but not too hard.
A small portion of the beaten whites are whisked vigorously into the chocolate mixture. This is then folded more carefully into the remainder of the whites. Speed is somewhat important here in order to avoid losing volume in the egg whites. This batter is poured into cake rings atop parchment paper. The 3 layers go into a 350-degree oven for 20 minutes. Begin the chocolate mousse by creaming 5 ounces of butter.
With the melted chocolate.
10 ounces of melted bittersweet chocolate are added to the butter. Make sure that the chocolate is not too warm or it will melt the butter. This mixture is then beaten to combine. Note the chef is checking the temperature on the bottom of the bowl. Egg yolks are then added.
At that point, I will add the yolks.
When this mixture is thoroughly combined, beaten sweetened egg whites will be added. After the cake layers have cooled, a rum simple syrup flavoring is brushed on. Part of the egg whites are whipped into the chocolate mixture to complete the mousse.
The meringue inside the chocolate on the butter on the yolks mix.
After incorporation, this goes into the remainder of the beaten egg whites. The chef switches from a spatula to a whisk to quickly finish the mousse. The mousse is then spread between the 3 layers of cake after soaking with the rum simple syrup mixture.
Second layer of flour ice cake. Make sure the layers are evenly. Rum syrup again.
Finally, the mousse is spread on the top and side, and the cake is chilled. A beautiful wood grain effect is achieved with 2 chocolates, bittersweet and milk, spread on a strip of plastic. The grain effect is started with a tool called a comb.
So that I use a comb special for when the dark chocolate is set, we can.
Then the milk chocolate is drizzled on.
Pour the milk chocolate over. It has to be very thin because the cake, you will want to cut it. And if it's too thick, everything will break. And before the chocolate set, you apply the plastic against the cake.
Finally, melted dark chocolate is tempered on a marble surface. The marble naturally cools the chocolate, which will then be scraped into bunting for final presentation.
Like a dentelle. The top is almost finished. The side needs to set to be able to take off the plastic and to have the shine on the chocolate. And we'll put it in the refrigerator for a few minutes. I just take it out from the refrigerator. Now I will take off the plastic